So thank you for joining today's virtual Blueprint for Kentucky's Children Lunch and Learn, Speaking Up for Kids in the 2025 legislative session. Today we're going to learn more about ways you can take action throughout the legislative session, which kicked off last week. And they're on that short break right now, and we'll reconvene on February 4th. So lots of opportunities over these next couple of weeks to be taking action from the things that you learned today. We'll review some Advocacy 101 tips and resources, share updates on some of the 2025 Blueprint for Kentucky's Children policy priorities, and give a few updates about Children's Advocacy Week, which is coming up the first week of March. Like I said, we'll have time for questions at the end, but please, be dropping those into the chat throughout, and please stay muted throughout the presentation. And we have some members of KYA's policy and communications teams on the call today. So I am Mara Powell. I should definitely introduce myself here. I'm our Chief Executive or Chief External Affairs Officer here at Kentucky Youth Advocates, and I'm joined by a few of my colleagues to give the presentation today, and they'll introduce themselves as they kick off. But without further ado, I'm going to get the slides going, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jamie to start the Advocacy 101 presentation. All right, whenever you're ready, Jamie.
Thank you, Mara. Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Garth, and like Mara said, I'm on the communications team at KYA. And we're going to kick off this lunch and learn today with strategies for effective advocacy. We hope that this will assist you with gaining an understanding of advocacy versus lobbying and how you can be an active advocate for whatever cause interests you. Also, that you have a foundational understanding of the legislative process. And lastly, we want you to feel confident in creating tangible next steps for your advocacy journey. So to begin, it's essential to understand what advocacy entails. Advocacy involves exerting pressure and influence on individuals and systems that possess the authority to provide us with what we desire or require. There are three key considerations to keep in mind as you embark on your advocacy journey. The first step is to identify what it is that you truly want. Next, you must reflect on why it is that you want it, and then determine who holds the power to give it to you. So now that we understand the foundation of advocacy, it's also crucial to recognize the distinction between advocacy efforts and lobbying, particularly for those of us employed at 501c3s or nonprofits. So here are some examples of appropriate actions that are related to basic advocacy. Advocacy can look like educating lawmakers on issues by providing data and research on the topic. It can look like sharing your story or others' experiences to inform lawmakers about the impact of an issue. It's building intentional relationships with your elected officials. Or it can be asking your legislators to support a piece of legislation that you care about as their constituent or as an individual. And then lastly, sharing causes with your networks about child-related policies is also a form of advocacy. And that's something that we do on a professional or personal level almost every day. Just remember that the key focus of advocacy is educating and bringing about the awareness of an issue. And there's no limit to the amount of advocacy a person or organization, such as a nonprofit, can do. Now, when advocacy efforts turn into lobbying, it has everything to do with influencing on specific legislation. Lobbying is when an organization or 501c3 directly asks a legislator or other elected official to support, oppose, or otherwise take action on a bill. Typically, only a small portion of the total amount of advocacy efforts made by nonprofits are considered lobbying. And this is because lobbying is highly regulated. So reporting tends to be another aspect that sets basic advocacy apart from lobbying. Nonprofits and their registered lobbyists, if they have them, must report on their lobbying efforts to maintain their status and meet state reporting requirements. So how do you advocate? Some of us may be really comfortable advocating publicly, while others prefer to be more behind the scenes. But just know that there's a place for everyone. Being a more public-facing advocate can look like attending a rally, like our rally at the Capitol during Children's Advocacy Week on March 5th. It could be writing an op-ed for your local newspaper on a topic, testifying for or against a bill in Frankfurt, or hosting a community event that engages different people on the topic. And there are also several options for more private efforts, such as contacting your legislator as a constituent on a bill, engaging with candidates in local elections by asking about their platform regarding children and families, researching issues, and of course, voting. We have many experienced advocates on the call today, so please feel free to share in the chat different ways that you've been an advocate. But the key takeaway here is that there's no one way to stand up and speak out, and all of these actions make us change makers. So now I'm going to pass it over to Alicia to talk about who those decision makers are in Kentucky.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie. As Jamie said, my name is Alicia Watley. I'm with Kentucky Youth Advocates and I work on the policy team here. So I'm going to go over a bit more about who are the decision makers in Kentucky and who we're talking about when we're talking about reaching out and advocating on behalf of Kentucky kids. So as you know, let's all take a step back to a civics class that we took probably many years ago. This should be a refresher for some folks. We of course have different branches of government, and the first one here on your screen is the governor and his cabinet members, or our executive branch. And they are, of course, the governor leads the state, an elected official, and also appoints members to different cabinets based on topic areas. And the work that happens in that branch has to do with implementing laws that are passed by our legislature, and also with establishing administrative regulations that help to establish rules underneath laws within our state. And then, of course, the second box on your screen, the legislature, or our legislative branch of government. In Kentucky, we have our House and our Senate. It mirrors what you hear about at the federal level in Congress with the House of Representatives and the Senate, and it's the same thing at the state level. So we have folks in each chamber. The House is larger. We have 100 members there, and they are elected every 2 years. And then the Senate is a bit smaller. There's 38 members there, and they are elected every 4 years. So something to be aware of is that there was a lot of elections that happened in November of 2024, just a few months ago. And so a lot of folks might have different representatives in Frankfurt starting this year as they get back into the legislative session. So something to remember and be aware of if maybe your senator or representative changed in the last couple months. You can go to the next slide. There we go. So this is a really in-depth graphic about the legislative process. So of course, this is how a bill makes its way through the process to becoming a state law. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on all these steps. I think one of the key takeaways here is that there are a lot of steps in this process. It is complex, and there's a lot that happens along the way as a bill, which is just the first kind of idea or proposal, comes along, and what the journey that it takes to eventually get to the governor's desk and be signed into law. And so a couple of things I want to point out here is that a bill has to be filed by one of our legislators in Frankfurt. So there's always going to be a primary sponsor, whether that's a senator or a representative. And depending on who sponsors and files that bill, that's the chamber it will start in. So if a senator files it, it will start in the Senate, and vice versa with the House. Those bills, as they are filed, will get a number. So you will see House Bill 1, Senate Bill 36. Those are often shortened to be HB 1 or SB 36. So that's kind of what we'll see. That's that first step in the process. And then a bill has to have an identical process in each chamber. So if it starts in the Senate, it will, number one, be assigned to a committee. Committees are topic-based, so you'll hear things like the Education Committee or the Health Services Committee. So bills are often assigned based on the topic area they're in. Once they're assigned to a committee, the topic-based committee will hear the bill, or they don't have to, but often they will hear a bill and they will have discussion around it. Folks can go and talk about the bill on either side if they're in favor or opposed. And members of that committee will have the opportunity to vote. So that's the first step, is that bill has to pass through that topic-based committee. If it passes the committee, it can go to the full Senate floor. And so this is where you'll hear us talk about it being on, getting a reading on the floor. Bills have to have 3 readings before they can be voted on. So it's passed a committee, it's now on the Senate floor. It has to be read 3 times, so you'll hear them do that a few days in a row. And this is where you might see folks standing up and having discussion about a bill. So these are members of that chamber talking about their opinions, what they think about the bill, asking questions, just trying to learn more before they make a vote. And then once it has been read 3 times, they will call it up for a vote by the full Senate or the full House, depending on where it is. And if it passes that process, it is identical. It goes to the other chamber and does the same thing. So if it passes through the Senate, gets all the way through that process, it'll go to the House and do the same thing. And if both chambers pass it, that's when it can go to the governor's desk, and the governor can make a decision to sign it into law or veto it. One thing to note about this process is that anywhere along the way, there's a lot of opportunities for changes to happen. So we can often see amendments come up. We can see committee substitutes. That means that they brought a slightly different version of a bill to committee than what was originally posted online. So we'll see small changes happen throughout the process, and they will consider things like language changes, amendments, all of those things. And then this slide is kind of the end of the process as it's getting closer to becoming law. What happens if the governor vetoes a bill? It does go back to the Senate and the House to make a determination if they want to override a veto. In Kentucky, that happens pretty frequently because there is a supermajority in our House and Senate of Republican lawmakers. So they have the votes often to override a veto. And so obviously if it passes, whether by a veto override or by the governor signing it into law, it will become Kentucky Revised Statute or KRS, and we'll receive a number to actually be in law in Kentucky. I think that's it on that overview. I know Mara is going to now navigate away from these slides and onto the LRC website, the Legislative Research Commission. And this is going to be a quick overview for folks of some places that you might want to be following along throughout the legislative session. If you're interested in following a bill, watching a committee meeting, kind of just following along in the action, we're going to show you some of the main places to navigate to on that website. It is a government website, so it's not always very easy to find things if you don't know what you're looking for. So we wanted to point out some important things to note. Okay, so I think we're here. This is sort of the homepage that you'll see. That image will change, so this might be what you see. It might be something else, but on this homepage, and it is legislature.ky.gov is kind of the main way to get there. If you scroll down just a bit, you'll see sort of all these boxes, and this is a good place to go if you're looking for something specific as far as legislative process and what's happening in Frankfort. So I want to point out a few things on this page. We'll go back to current bills at the end, but the first thing to maybe pay attention to is the schedules and calendars tab. If you click into that, you will see that there are, number one, a lot of archives, so you'll see it by year. But you could click on the 2025 standing committee schedule. That will tell you when those topic-based committees will be scheduled to meet. They usually, once they're back in session on February 4th, and throughout the rest of the session, they will plan to meet weekly. So they have a standing day and time that they meet. So that is available there. And then the legislative calendar over on the right-hand side under calendar, that just gives us the working days, so you can see which days they are actually going to be in Frankfort doing that work and which days they will not plan to be there. So you can check that out as well. So that's a good place to go just for some basic schedules and calendars. And then if we go back to the homepage, the legislators tab is also a good place to find information about the lawmakers that we're talking about here. So you'll see first that they have some of the folks in leadership highlighted on this main page, but then if you go over on the right-hand side, there's a few different ways to look up different people. So you could click on the Senate members and see a whole list in alphabetical order of all the Senate members. Same thing with the House. You can look up who your legislators are. Again, if you don't know that, or if yours might have changed in the recent election, this is a good thing to do. You just put in your home address and it will tell you who represents you. And any legislator that you click on, it kind of has some basic information about them. So you can see their picture if you don't know what they look like and you want to recognize them in Frankfurt. But also you can see some background information about that person. They have a little bio in there. And then you can also see a list of committees that they sit on. So if you're interested in seeing which committees your representative or senator sits on, you could click on those and see kind of what their interest areas are. Okay, so if we go back to the home page again, we're back at these boxes. The committees box is also a good place to look, and I'm going to show you what we are often looking at here. So number one, you can look at, this is just sort of the basics about what are committees, but if we click on House standing committees, those are the ones that are going to meet during session. So standing committees are the ones meeting regularly during this process. There's a lot of committees. That's the list of all of them, as you can see. If you click on one, we're going to click on Appropriations and Revenue first. So this is the House Appropriations and Revenue Standing Committee. Number one, you can see the jurisdiction. So what types of issues go to this committee? If you're not sure what they might deal with, it's there. There's a list of members, and those are all links. So you can click directly into any person's list or any person's profile there. And then as the session progresses, and these committees are meeting more regularly, if you click on meeting minutes over on the right-hand side, this is where you can actually find agendas for these committee meetings. So they often will send these out or they will publish them in the week leading up to when a committee meets. And as I said, these are going to start meeting weekly. So you don't always have a lot of notice on what the agenda looks like. Sometimes it's a very quick turnaround on when we get the agenda. But if you're looking for information about what a committee might be talking about or what bills are coming up, you can find these agendas here. They will be published, as they come out. And then not yet on here, but after a committee happens, they sometimes publish minutes or other sort of presentation info that was shared. So if somebody brought a PowerPoint with information to a committee, those are often published online after the fact. So you'll start to see these populate as the session goes on. But that's some good information about how to look up committee information. Okay, so then back to our homepage. Yes, I just saw a question in the chat. Committees open to the public. Yes, so you can at any time go to Frankfurt and sit in the annex and watch a committee meeting. If you've never been to the annex, if you do go, there's public entrances. There's lots of information online on how to get in, but they have TV screens within that building, sort of like when you're at the airport and you're looking for what gate your flight is at. It has what committee meetings are meeting at what time in what room on these boards throughout the day. So you can kind of find your way to the correct room if you're trying to watch one in person. But that also brings us to another one of these main boxes here, which is live coverage, the one on the bottom right. All these committee meetings are also streamed online in live time. So there's a couple different spots that they are often streaming. But if you're just looking for a quick link on how to get to the right spot, this is a good place to go. Click on that live coverage box. And they have both KET does a lot of legislative coverage. So they have a page on KET's site that has streaming. And then if there's a bunch of committee meetings happening at the same time and KET only has 2 channels doing it, they also have a YouTube page where they will do live streaming through the LRC. So that's another spot to bookmark if you guys are just looking for the coverage. But there's a couple examples of how to watch those, and they are open to the public. You can certainly watch those or attend in person. And yes, thank you, Chase. There is also an app from KET. So if you're looking for live coverage that way, you can definitely check it out. Okay, so that I think is a lot of the main spots here. The other thing I wanted to just point out to folks is the current bills tab. So, and what you'll see is that it said, I think 25 RS there. That means regular session 2025. So that's where we are right now. Mara clicked into this page and you can see there's just tons of different links on this page. It looks like a lot if you don't know what you're looking at. What I would encourage folks to do is look at just a couple things on this page, not the entire page. Number one is the 2 sort of on the left column and the middle column that are purple. That means Mara's clicked on them before. But the Senate bills and the House bills, that would just give you like a full list of every bill that's been filed in either chamber at any time. And then if you look over under miscellaneous, which is in the right column, there's a couple things that I think can be really helpful. One is bills and amendments by date. So if you're looking for something and you're like, I know this was filed yesterday, so I know what day it was filed, that's a good way to look it up. Another one is by title. So if you were to click into that, it would give you the title of each bill, which often has sort of those keywords or topic areas in it. And you could do, you know, a Control F search of your page for a certain topic area if you're looking for it. Also, if you know that your legislator filed a bill, and they are the sponsor on something, if you go to their legislator profile page that we talked about earlier, there's also an option there to look at bills that they've sponsored. So you can see like what bills just your specific legislator has filed. And yeah, there's also options on here for like by sponsor name. You can do that as well. So there's lots of ways to look at different categories or, you know, different ways to categorize bills that have been filed. But if you want to just see the full list, you can look on this page and click through there. And so the last thing that we want to do is just click on a bill and show you all what those pages look like. So we're going to click into House bills here. Again, this is every bill that's already been filed. They've been in session for 4 days, and you can see there's over 200 bills here. So we are going to click on House Bill 1 just because it has a good example of lots of actions in it. So Mara clicked into that. This is sort of the summary page. So it gives you the basic information about the bill. It tells you where it is in that process that we talked about earlier. So some things here, it tells you like, again, the last action that's happened, the title of it, the bill documents, that link, those links there show you exactly what it, you know, the actual bill language. So the introduced is the very first version that came up. And then the current is with any amendments and changes. As I said earlier, they often change. If it has a fiscal impact, there might be information there. You can see the sponsors. So those are all the legislators who have signed on to the bill. There's usually a summary available here. Sometimes it's very short like this one. Other times you'll see a summary that's like 4 paragraphs. So it kind of depends on the complexity of the bill. And then at the bottom, you can see, again, sort of all the actions that have happened. So there's been a bunch of floor amendments filed on this one. You can read all of those. And you can see exactly on each day last week what happened with this bill. It got assigned to a committee. It got heard in a committee. Here's the votes, how it passed. It went to the floor. It passed by this many votes. So you can kind of see all of those details. And then one other thing is, Mara, if you scroll up just a tad, there is a button. If you see where it says votes, there's a button that says vote history. So if you want to see how your legislator voted on a certain bill, you could click on that and see where the vote history was. Sometimes folks are interested in that. So all of this will start populating on all the bills as we get further into session. So far, this is the only one that's really had a lot of movement to it. This is the income tax rate in Kentucky, if you've heard any news about that. So it's been a very active bill. Okay, so I think that is sort of the conclusion of this little webpage overview piece. I'm gonna, while Mara's switching screens, look at the chat and see if I missed anything else, but I don't think so. Okay, wonderful. And we'll let Mara get the slides pulled back up. And I think I'm going to pass it over to Mara.
Thank you. Does the slide look okay? Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Alicia, for that overview of the LRC website. I think it's a super helpful tool to become familiar with as advocates, to be able to reference. And when you're there and looking up your who your legislator, so who your state senator and state representative are, you can use what you learn there for maybe setting up a meeting, perhaps during Children's Advocacy Week, the first week of March. So we wanted to share just a couple of tips here before we get into the Blueprint policy updates. So when you are setting up a meeting with your legislator, whether that's in Frankfort or within your community, you know, make sure you make an appointment. Don't just kind of, you know, show up in Frankfort and assume that they'll be able to meet with you, because they are typically booked in 15-minute segments throughout the day, and, you know, have committee meetings and other caucus meetings and all of the things. So, you know, making an appointment, doing your homework before you show up for that appointment. So, you know, get to know them a little bit, understand, you know, what their priorities are, what they're sponsoring that year. And also prep yourself on what you would like to share with them. And at that meeting, be friendly and professional. You know, these are folks who, you know, you are their constituent, and they are accountable to, you know, you as a member of their community. But you also, you know, they're people too. And we always say, you know them before you need them. And so being able to build that relationship and being friendly and professional within communications with them goes a long way. And if you were asked a question in that meeting that you're not sure the answer of, we always say, like, follow up with, I'm not sure, but I want to double check that. And that really allows you a moment to follow up with them following that meeting. With a thank you note is something we always promote as well, to thank them for their time. Follow up with any information that you were able to share with them that day, whether it was a Blueprint fact sheet, your personal story. And then if if they asked a really good question that you didn't know the answer to, be able to then share that with them in your follow-up. And then if you're just giving your legislators a call or calling the LRC legislative line, when you call that line, you can inform the operator that you are a constituent of, Senator X or Representative Y and would like to convey your opinion on a certain issue. They'll want to know kind of some basic information about you, your name and address, just to confirm that you're a constituent. And then you would be able to say, as a constituent, I want, Senator Doe to vote yes on Senate Bill X. So keeping it clear and concise for those calls to action throughout the legislative session about how, back to Jamie's note, how you can advocate and really, push for a bill that you are supportive of as a constituent of, that senator or representative. And then finally here, tips for writing your legislators. So whether that's, a letter and you want to mail it to them, or an email, as Alicia said, on the legislator profiles on that LRC website, you'll find all the information about, their legislative line, their email, sometimes even like their Twitter handle or X handle, and then how to, get connected with them. So in that email, whether that's a short email or a little bit longer, sharing a personal story, and how it relates to whatever bill that you are supporting or asking them to oppose, including the bill title and numbers so that they are clear on what issue you're talking about in particular. And one thing that we share is that try to keep it simple by just talking about one issue item in an email so that they know, and you can have it in the subject line, vote yes on Senate Bill X. And then again, don't forget to include your name and address so that so that they know that you are their constituent. All right, well, before we turn it over to policy updates, I did want to just kind of share this final Advocacy 101 slide, which I know we shared a lot of information and different ways to be an advocate for kids throughout the legislative session. And so, following us on social media, making sure you're signed up for emails, reading the KYA blog, knowing the data and research. And, I know we have it on there, the Kentucky Kids Count Project. If you haven't had a chance to review the 2024 data book and the interactive dashboard, please do so you can use that as a basis point for how kids are faring in your community to make the case about why these bills should be passed. We also at KYA share the bill tracker, and that went live last week, and that's where we have highlighted the 5 Blueprint bills that have been filed, and we'll continue to track those bills, any other bills that are filed, and then any other bills that are good for kids will be tracked on there as well. And we'll drop some links in the chat for you all to be able to access those. And then, of course, checking out the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children webpage so you can see all of the information we're about to hear. On each of the Blueprint items. We have fact sheets and other resources related to each of those so that you can be best equipped to be able to talk about these issues when you are talking with our legislative leaders. All right, well, I'm going to turn it back over to Alicia and then Courtney to be able to share some of the updates on the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children 2025 priorities.
Awesome. Thanks, Mara. So again, I'm Alicia Watley on the policy team here at KYA, and I am going to start us off and then tag team with one of my other colleagues on going through all of the 10 Blueprint items. We're going to go pretty quickly through these. I I think a lot of folks have heard about these items already. This has been, our blueprint's been out for a couple months. But we wanted to give some updates on where these sit after the first week of the legislative session. So some of these we have bill numbers for you all to be following along as they progress through the process, and others we just have some updates on kind of where we're at with trying to get them filed and moving. So we will hop right in to a couple of our child welfare and safety related priorities. So the first one here is all around keeping kids safer in their digital spaces. So if you are not familiar with the term sexual extortion or sextortion, this is when perpetrators are often using chatting features on things like social media or gaming sites, talking to young people, posing as a peer or a romantic interest, and then coercing their victims into sharing some sort of explicit content, often photos of themselves. And then, of course, this is where the extortion part comes in. They use threats of exposing that content or harming them to demand things like money or additional content from the young person. This is a growing crime happening across the country and in Kentucky, and we're seeing a lot of these happening on a lot of gaming sites and different things that kids are accessing on their phones. So we are trying to do a couple of things with this priority. One is to establish sextortion as a felony under criminal law in Kentucky and also classify it as a sex crime, and then increase awareness and also ways to support victims through schools by educating students and their parents about this happening. We do already have a couple of bills with language filed on this, which is really exciting. So we have Senate Bill 73, which is from Senator Julie Rocky Adams. And then we have House Bill 47, which is from Representative Baker. So if you all want to check those out, you can see those. And then the next one on your screen is something that KY has been working on for a couple of years, but this is to ensure safety in the learning environments of our kiddos and reducing the risk of abuse in a school setting. So we are looking to ensure that public and certified non-public schools are conducting thorough background checks and getting reference checks for all their potential employees, requiring applicants to disclose if they've had past investigations or actions related to sexual misconduct, and banning non-disclosure agreements if they are under investigation and leave a place of employment and try to go somewhere else. And then also implementing some training around sexual misconduct in our school systems. And we do already have a bill number for this one as well. It's House Bill 36 from Representative Tipton. And then we'll go to the next one here to move into some of our health related items. So this first one, again, you've probably seen this from KYA in past years. We've been working on this for a couple of years now. We're really looking for some ways to better enforce the Tobacco 21 law that we have on the books in Kentucky. Because although we have raised the age that you can sell tobacco and nicotine products to 21 in Kentucky, which is in alignment with federal law, what we're seeing is that there are still a lot of sales happening to young people across the state. And so we're looking for some more accountability on our retailers that they are not selling to anyone underage. And what that looks like is licensing our retailers to be able to sell nicotine or tobacco products, doing some compliance checks on them and making sure that there are penalties if they are selling to kids. And we do not yet have a bill filed on this, but this issue was heard during the interim, and Senator Higdon talked about his intention to file a bill. So we're really excited to see that coming in February. And then the next one on your screen is sort of an adjacent item around preventing and treating nicotine addiction among young people. As a result of a settlement, Kentucky was part of a multi-state lawsuit against Juul, one of the biggest manufacturers several years ago of e-cigarettes, and their practices marketing to kids. We are getting some settlement dollars in Kentucky. And so one of the things that we're looking for is for our legislature to allocate those dollars back to the problem that Juul created, which is youth nicotine addiction. So we do have House Bill 187 from Representative Duval filed, which would direct those dollars towards prevention and cessation programming, which is really exciting. And then we will go into one more health item and then an education item. So the first one on your screen here is all around expanding options for safe and equitable settings for pregnant and birthing women. by paving the way to licensing and opening freestanding birth centers in Kentucky, which we do not currently have. There are some restrictions in place in our current law that make it difficult to open these centers. Historically, we've not seen anybody be able to license one of these centers and open one, but we would love to see it happen. And so we have Senate Bill 17 from Senator Funky Fromeyer and also House Bill 90 from Representative Nemes. And those are identical bills that are moving through both chambers. So we're really excited to see that those have been filed. And then the last one on your screen here is all around serving children with special needs in the early childhood space. And so what we know about this is that Kentucky, like much of the nation, is experiencing a crisis in childcare access. And what that has led to is that a lot of our childcare centers are operating at the highest allowable ratios of adults to children, and also they have really long waiting lists. Families of children with special needs are experiencing even more difficulty finding and really sustaining childcare for their kiddos. We're seeing that unfortunately Kentucky child care centers are having to refuse to serve students with disabilities because they are not well equipped to serve the special needs of those kids. And so we are prioritizing ways to incentivize our child care centers to serve children with disabilities, and also requiring some additional training for their staff members to better serve that population. We do not have a bill on this file, but we've had some really good conversations and we're excited to see some progress on this in the coming months. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Courtney to cover the last 4 items.
All right, thanks, Alicia. And hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Downs. I'm also on the policy team here at KYA. So first off is a juvenile justice issue. We want to ensure that when a kid gets in trouble, that their legal rights are being protected by requiring them to speak with an attorney for legal advice, someone to explain what their rights are, to explain what happens in the process, not necessarily representation, before they waive their Miranda rights. So there isn't an identified sponsor for this bill yet, so there is much more to come on that front. And the next one is we want to reduce the impact of parental incarceration on kids by expanding options for community-based sentencing alternatives to incarceration. This would only be for nonviolent offenses, and it would allow the judge to take the defendant's status as a primary caregiver to a minor child into consideration at sentencing. Senator Julie Rocky Adams has already agreed to carry this bill, which is really exciting. The bill language has already been drafted. It'll be titled the Family Preservation and Accountability Act. And then once session resumes, we expect it'll be filed pretty quickly. And then next slide, thank you. And then the last 2 are just a couple of housing related priorities. So the first one is we want to promote family housing stability by sealing eviction filings that are dismissed. So meaning these are the ones that do not result in an actual eviction. And we also want to prohibit minors from being named on any of those filings. We may actually have companion bills for this issue. The Senate has secured a sponsor already, and House leadership has also agreed to identify a sponsor. And at KYA, we are engaging our housing policy ambassadors. Those are young people who have lived experience with these particular issues in all of the advocacy efforts as well. And finally, we wanted to focus on utilities and specifically protecting families from the utility disconnections, especially during extreme weather conditions like we saw last week, and create pathways for them to get reconnected to electricity and heating quicker. Representative Wilner plans to carry this bill again this year, so we expect that she will continue working to build bipartisan support and also finding champions for this issue. So I will pass it to Jamie.
Yeah, so, I threw in my little shameless plug earlier on the 2025 Children's Advocacy Week. It's coming up very soon. We invite everyone to join us for virtual and in-person events from March 3rd to March 7th. To prepare for call, we will be hosting a prep webinar that will include our schedule for the week's events, updates on key policies for advocates to discuss with legislators, as well as a few tips on how to best navigate our rally day at the Capitol. So please register and join us for that on February 26th at noon. Also, our rally day at the Capitol will be on Wednesday, March 5th at 11. This is a great opportunity to have meetings scheduled with your legislators and connect with other advocates about issues that affect children and families. As always, we invite organizations to bring groups of youth to the Capitol on this day so that they can participate in the rally, also meet with officials, and use our social media station. Lastly, we couldn't have this powerful event without supporters like you. So first, let me thank all who have signed up to sponsor our events so far. And for those that are interested, we still have packages available that can be viewed on our call page. So with that, we hope to see everyone there in March. Information on registration for events or bringing a group of youth to CAD or even being a sponsor can be found on our call landing page, and I am dropping in the link right now. Thank you.
And I think we can maybe take some time for just Q&A. Is that what's up next? I think so. And I already see a couple of questions that were in the chat, so we can address those first. And if others have questions, feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, or put it in the chat and we'll try to cover them. So the first one I see, Courtney, this is probably a question for you. Is there an outline ready for the family incarceration bill? I don't know if you mean by outline, do you mean bill language or something else? But Courtney, I don't know if you have anything to point folks to around that. There was an
I
interim hearing
meant
on
bill
that, right?
language. I meant like, did you already have like something that will be like a template that the bill will come from as far as like the actual, I'm curious about the actual details that would be in it, if there were any, or if it was all very generic language.
Oh, so the bill drafter has already put some language together. I don't think it has been completely finalized. I think there may have been like one or two things that they still had to tweak. So there isn't anything that we can necessarily share publicly, but they do have all of the details hashed out. And as soon as we're able to share it publicly, then we will.
And I believe there was an interim hearing on that issue. Is that correct,
Mhm.
Courtney?
Yeah, there was.
So if you're interested in hearing kind of what some of the factors that folks wanted included in that bill or different components, I think that might be a good place to, I think we have a blog that kind of summarized that interim hearing if anybody wants to look back at that. It was a few months ago.
Where would that be found?
I'm sure Mara could probably get it in the chat for us shortly.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, you're good. We can definitely pull it for you and get you a direct link to that. Okay, and then I also see a question probably for Jamie. Is there any sort of waiver for underage youth that might want to attend? I think that was in reference to the rally, if you want to speak to that piece.
Yeah, so there are no official waivers for underage youth to attend the rally since they are typically accompanied by chaperones from their own organization. However, since this is an in-school day, we encourage all of our young people who are still in school to get credit for that. So you can go to the school and pick up an educational enhancement opportunity form and just outline what the day's event looks like and submit that so that they can receive credit for being absent that day.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jamie. And if you have more detailed questions about bringing youth to Children's Advocacy Day, Jamie is our resident expert on what that can look like, and she can definitely answer any additional questions if you have them. And then I also see a question about when the VIP legislator event will occur for sponsorship purposes. And Mara, I don't know if we have like a date and time that we could necessarily specifically point to since we're still
Yeah.
finalizing the schedule, but
We do have that booked, and we will be communicating that with sponsors of Children's Advocacy Day directly. But it'll be the morning of the rally day at the Capitol. So that morning and in the cafeteria, likely beginning around 8:30. So we'll make sure that you have all the details, but definitely be saving the date to join us for as long as you can on that day in Frankfort.
wonderful. Thank you. And I see that the link to that blog was posted, so thanks for sharing that in the chat. Any other questions that we missed or anybody that wanted to add a question? All right, wonderful. Well, with that, I think I'll turn it over to Mara. Are you going to close this
Yeah.
out for the day?
Yep, I can do that. So, yeah, thank you all so much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to hear these updates, get all of the insider knowledge. We encourage you all to share once we have the recording ready, and I'll send out a follow-up email with some helpful links of what we've shared today. To please pass it along to your colleagues, any young people or groups or networks that you work with who may find this interesting or helpful for them throughout the session. Of course, we have some call to actions. Once we get back into legislative working days, there'll be some call to actions around each of the blueprint bills, most likely. So, saving that bill tracker webpage and our action alerts page. And then the other call to action, I'll give it again for Jamie's sake, is, check out the call webpage. I know we don't have virtual event details on there just yet, but with the committee schedule out recently, we're hoping to get those nailed down within the next couple of weeks so we can begin promoting those. And you all can be registering to join us virtually throughout the week. As well as details about that day at the Capitol in Frankfort on March 5th. So thank you all so much for your questions and your engagement today. Look for that follow-up email, and we hope to see you in Frankfort on March 5th. Have a great day, y'all.